So, Richard, what did you feel about the overall quality of this category?
This was a very challenging, there was very complex whiskies that we saw. When they were good, they were great, but overall, I thought things went really well. But all I would say to you is that when it was bad, it was below the level of expectations. And I really hope that craftsmanship, the image of bourbon, they kind of look at that, look at the way they mature the whiskey, the woods, etc. Because these ones that are below what we're expecting brings the whole category into sort of disrepute. And we must get, bourbon is a great classic whiskey, but we must raise that profile to give the image around the world.
Yeah, 100%. Nate, what did you feel?
I definitely resonate with Richard's thoughts. I do believe that certain categories actually shown quite dramatically better than other categories, so I quite liked the cask strength category that we had. Overall, I thought they fared quite well, and we ended today, for instance, with a gold on a 66% alcohol, 132 proof, which is hard to come through and show all your notes at such a high level of alcohol, and they've done that so well in this particular competition.
Shannon, what do you feel? I mean, you had no and low as well, so...
Right, exactly. When it comes to the whiskeys, you know, I think we're all pretty aligned. We spoke a bit yesterday about how it's so important for so many of these new producers to earn our trust in terms of being able to show
100%.
show that they understand the fundamentals and keep it simple at the beginning, do it that really, really well before perhaps getting more ambitious or experimental. While innovation and experimentation is necessary for the advancement of any category and exciting and fun, we still need to see more, I think, of the core fundamental skills coming through on just doing something clean and straightforward and well.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of issues, I think, with wood management. I think there was a lot of issues with maybe grain and how it was coming in and, you know, the quality of the grain. I think they were very ambitious on some things, and I think alcohol has to be looked at. We had one whiskey that was absolutely beautiful, but the ABV was like 70 plus, and
irresponsible, maybe, perhaps.
It can't, you just lose all the amazing flavors behind it. So if that had been just like 60s, it would have probably been gold outstanding, and it was in silver because of the, you know, the alcohol there. So I think there's a lot of things that people now have to go back and look at and really understand.
Like in Scotland, we have a lot of new boutique distilleries, and these boutique distilleries are looking for innovations, just as what you were talking, Shannon, about making it different, making it acceptable. But when you start off, you must really get the basics into place. Don't just rush into seasoning or etc. Try and get your distillation, try and get the wood, and then after a few years, then experiment. All I would say is, these guys that are coming on for the first time, they must be patient, they must wait, but they must have the image of bourbon at the forefront, because they are representing something classical, as what we think we saw when it was a matured whiskey, and when it came from, well, we don't know, but when the reputation of really shone through those that had been in the market, had been there for many, many years, whereas the new boys were learning, we're being innovative, we're being exciting, but are we really getting it right?
And I think you actually, the other day I heard you speaking, you're having a conversation about a Calvados cask and the finish on it, and someone said, I can't quite get to find where the apples are going to come through, and I've been waiting for a couple of years now, and I distinctly remember you saying, it took 4 years for you to get your Calvados to come through with apple. And I think that there's one issue that I've had an issue with respect to American whiskeys as a whole. They just don't give it enough time sometimes. They're so quick to rush things out in the market, and sometimes all you need to do is hold back a little bit, wait a little longer, and just see that development and maturation occur, and it would change the entire landscape of American whiskey.
Yeah, 100%.
Regarding what you were saying about proof, Don, and something being a really beautiful product, but maybe just a little too hot, something I have seen is that now being an American and growing up on American whiskey, and then moving to London and growing my exposure to European and other world whiskeys, I feel like with American whiskey, there's this mentality of higher is better. The stronger it is,
bigger
inherently,
is better.
The better it is, which is not necessarily
and you've
the
got
case.
both sides of the coin.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting, I think, with American wine, it went through Parkerization, where it was all big and it was bold and it was all about the oak, and I think whiskey is doing that to a certain extent now. And I think in Europe we're starting to see those big, really full whiskies go back, and we're starting to see these really lovely fruit bombs coming through. But I think here it's definitely that,
I struggle a bit because
big
with
whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. I struggle a bit with a bartending background because often in those types of environments, bigger is better, because that higher proof spirit will certainly be able to hold up to dilution and other cocktail modifiers and that kind of thing. So we would always get so excited about a new cask strength release of whatever the case may be. But now trying to kind of separate myself from that perspective and think about them as standalone products is kind of like a little bit jarring at times.
Everyone wants to drink a bottle, not just a glass. So guys, I mean, I think what was quite interesting in this judging, we had a lot of things like American single malts, and of course there was a lot of rye and things like that. Did you think any of them particularly stood out or shone or were more interesting than others? Do you think there's areas that maybe were needing more development? Shannon, what did you feel?
American single malts particularly, as a relatively new emerging category and style, there was a lot that were very high quality. There were a lot that maybe were a little bit less so, but because their styles, there's so little regulation at this phase within this American single malt category, the styles felt a little bit all over the place. And I think maybe while it's wonderful to be able to work in that way and kind of create your own style of distillate and whiskey, I think the category at large could benefit from a little bit of corralling and kind of just
Absolutely.
streamlining in terms of what the regulation looks like.
Yeah, 100% agree. Richard, did you have any categories that you particularly thought were very interesting, or maybe Sean?
I like the single malt category, but just as Shannon says, there's a lot of them looking for their identity. And what Nate said is you must be patient. Don't just start jumping around. But once you find that niche, once you find from your consumer, and don't just think yourself, you need to ask people around you, how did you find the whiskey? And get a genuine answer. And then concentrate on that. Because if you come up with a particular flavor, do your experimentation, but it'll be one that will help your whiskey to shine. Like the single malts in Scotland. They all are, for the new boutique distilleries, they're all finding their level. But it takes time, and I'm not talking 2 or 3 months. I'm talking about many, many years. And that's why you've got to be patient. But in the meantime, make sure that you're maturing your spirit in good American white oak casks. Let it, like a baby, let it develop. Then it becomes a little bit mature. Then introduce your sherries or what have you. People just sort of jump on and say, I'm going to do a sherry cask as soon as it's distilled. Please, the whiskey's just been born. Let it settle down. Give it time. But a lot of people, because they start up, they need the money. And that's what they do. They just say, we're going to release it immediately because we need the money coming back in. And sometimes that's not the answer. I can understand where they're coming from. But if you want the quality doesn't happen overnight. You've got to wait for it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's rushing things to market that aren't ready is such a game killer, because if you don't get it right first time, you can't go back.
You say that, and I think immediately that the reason they're doing it is the amount of competition in American whiskey since COVID has gone up tenfold, and you're trying to just outlast everybody or beat them to the market and beat them to the marketing punch, and that's not the way to do it. And I think those that are playing the long game will be the most successful, as they always are. I did find that the bottled and bond category did quite well, and I think that that's got a standard and a staple, and it's got everything that's structured that American single malt doesn't have as a structure right now. And I feel like they need to mimic their own and create their own style of structure similar to bottled and bond that would be for the American single malt category, to really give them a definition of who they are.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's about, there are some beautiful whiskeys that we've had over the last couple of days, and it's the ones that have really taken their time on the oak, made sure the casks were good, have really made sure that the grains was good, that the distillation was faultless, and they were the ones that really stood out for me. I mean, we had some beautiful ryes, we had some beautiful bourbons, and we actually had an awesome single malt, which was probably my favorite of the whole competition. But I think you're right. It's about that, finding that time and that structure, and really giving yourself the space to and the cash flow to allow you to take your time.
Not an easy answer, because if you want that cash, you know, can you wait?
Can you wait?
And don't make a gin. So guys, do you think there's quite a lot of opportunity within the UK market to, you know, for American producers to go out with, especially maybe with the single malt category as well, to go up against the Scottish? Nate?
I think it's a very tough go. I think that I've seen something very interesting happen. A lot of the American producers have decided that they are going to try and move into the Chinese market right now. And I feel like that may not be the total play there, because the home of Scotch whiskey is kind of the home of whiskey in general, and I feel like they could actually dominate in that category, particularly because there are so many Americans in the UK market as tourists or on working visas that would love to see their own products on shelves, and they don't see them enough at all. And I feel like that's where we're missing the mark hugely. If we had all the hotels, all the restaurants and bars that had everything American, or at least some section of American whiskey, it would really help the market as a whole. Because you've got to, you know, rising tides raise all ships. If you've got this sort of time that we're talking about waiting for the cask, spend the time to grow your market in a new area, and I feel the UK is on the precipice of doing that. If we can just stay consistent and get Americans to believe more in it, it will shine through.
Yeah, the opportunity definitely exists, and I'm of two minds about what can do well, because I think if the American single malt producers really can develop something really special, it works well as a point of entry for an audience that's used to thinking about this single malt category at large, obviously from Scotland, etc., but also the ability to kind of embrace what's different about what you're doing and bring intrinsically American style whiskeys, bourbons, etc., into the UK market, and embrace the fact that that is something that is different than what's being done over there generally. When I moved there from New York, I was absolutely shocked that no one over there drinks American whiskey, and I was like, don't you understand? This is so delicious. There's so much quality. But in my experience over there, the market for American whiskey drinking is American tourists. So I guess the question is, how then do you
Convert.
Yeah, well, convert, or at least expose or open the door for new American whiskey drinkers.
Richard, any thoughts from you?
Well, one thing you've got to remember when it comes to the UK, especially in Scotland, but particularly let's take London as a whole, the consumer is highly demanding, and yes, they stick to the main brands in Scotch, but also in bourbon. But one thing is sure, they're looking for differences now.
100%.
Because we've got younger consumers who are saying, no, we don't take the main brands, we have the crafted whiskies. But when I come to that, yes, you have to be crafted. Now let's start off. I don't want a bourbon with so much blinking ice. What are you doing here? This is a crafted bourbon, but it's from a new distillery. But then once again, it has to come up to that quality credentials, because they will be, those that are starting off will say, is it like a single malt? Is it like a blended whiskey? No, this is bourbon, but it has to have that edge of quality to really convince them. And I'm sure the younger people are looking for some differences, not just with a mixer, but maybe on their own, maybe a twist, maybe even a bit of lime, a bit of something, just to say, this is different. If you take this, it really show you what bourbon is all about.
It's actually quite funny you say that, because the Japanese market, that next generation shunned Japanese whiskey and went for American whiskey, and it was extremely successful. If we can convince that same thing to happen naturally versus that way, it'll do very well.
I mean, I think from my perspective, being the largest whiskey retailer in the UK, I think it's very much, I mean, what I look for is quality first and foremost. I'm, not put anything bad on our shelves. And I think it's also people that have really thought about the packaging, people have a good story, because actually in the UK we love America. There's a lot of love for America, there's a lot of synergies between our two countries, and I think, that next generation that wants something a little bit richer, a little bit fuller, and maybe a little bit sweeter, bourbon is a really obvious place to go. And also with the Scotch prices going that way, Japanese prices going that way, world whiskey as a whole category has a real opportunity to really capture the consumer.
Right.
Richard, how have you found the last couple of days in Kentucky?
Okay, the first thing, as you all know, I love history. So 230 years ago, Daniel Boone arrived in this wonderful place, and he said, this is the second paradise. And I must agree, when I flew in, once again, it is a second paradise to me. But more importantly, what makes it special, you know, I got on the airport, howdy, how are you? Everybody's been so nice. We come to Bardstown, Louisville, everybody's been great. And when we've gone to the distilleries, you can see that love, that passion. They want to create the very best, and that has shone through. But it's about not just the spirit, it's about the people. 100%. These are the people here in Kentucky that are really driving what quality is all about, and that's why it's so important that we bring the message through that this is a great place, you produce great whiskies, but all work together as a family. It's like blended whiskies all coming together, loving in a loving union. Same with the whiskey. And all I'm going to say is when I go back to Bonnie, Scotland, and I know it's raining there just now, but it really will take a heart of the warmth of Kentucky with me, because this is somewhere very, very special.
Building my entire career within the hospitality sector, both in slightly in New Mexico, but then primarily in New York and London, you know, thinking about all things always when it comes to that angle, that hospitality angle, I have been absolutely blown away by the hospitality of our arrival and just our entire experience. Everyone's been, like you said, Richard, just so kind and welcoming and really going above and beyond to try and make us feel very, very special and very at home. Yeah.
Nate, do you want to say anything?
I love it here.
That was easy. No, I mean, I completely echo everything you guys said. I think, you know, from the moment you step off the plane and someone sings to you to the minute you go into a bar and there's a chicken, and, you know, you're like, I think we have had such an incredible experience. I think the people here have been wonderful. I mean, I'm going to give a big shout out to Bardstown because they have hosted
100%.
us spectacularely. You know, the guys at Heaven Hill, Lux Row, all of them have been absolutely incredible hosts, and I think
Rabbit Hole,
have, you know, I think that it comes through in the warmth of the spirit. And yeah, again, you know, people don't buy product, they buy into people. So cheers to
Cheers to Beverage.